morning. I'm so excited to welcome Rebecca tonight to speak for us. Rebecca joined the Audubon in March of 2023 after nearly a decade with the Conservation Voters of South Carolina. She brings a deep understanding of conservation, political, and policy landscape to South Carolina to her role as the executive director of the Audubon. In addition to helping double the size of the organization and tripling its operating budget during her tenure, where did my line go? Rebecca was also pivotal in the development and success of the South Carolina Conservation Coalition, a formal dues-paying coalition comprising over 40 environmental organizations across the state, which I'm sure she'll talk to us more about. Rebecca spent her early career as a watershed manager at South Carolina's Department of Health and Environmental Control, and later as an associate director of Southeast Conservation for American Rivers. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, a certificate in Environmental Ethics, and a Master of Science degree in Conservation, Ecology, and Sustainable Development from the University of Georgia. When not at work, you can find her volunteering in her community or spending time in nature with her husband and son and their 2 dogs and a cat. So everyone, welcome Rebecca. Feel free to walk around. Yes. Like that.
Okay, I'm gonna do this because that's too tall. It just doesn't work. So, all right, and everyone can hear me just fine. You'll let me know if I get weird with the microphone. So thank you for having me today. It's nice to be up here. I really love coming to the Upstate. I'm based in Columbia, and we're a statewide organization. And I've been spending too much time on the coast, so this was really nice to get up here and deal with actually less traffic. So I appreciate that. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to just lead y'all through a journey of what Audubon is doing, what we're doing in South Carolina, kind of explain some of that, because I actually don't think we tell our story very well in South Carolina. That's something we're trying to change. So I just wanted to share some of that with y'all. I've been in this state since I escaped Georgia in 2006 and thought I'd spend a few years working at DHEC and then get out of here. And it sucked me in. So, I spent that time, working in the conservation space. And even I didn't realize the depth of the work that Audubon did across the South Carolina landscape. So hopefully I can share that with y'all tonight. We can talk about ways we can also partner, that sort of thing. Please feel free to pepper me with questions. Like, I'm going to show a bunch of slides at you, but I really don't like formal presentations that much. I find them boring. So y'all please help me make this interesting, okay? And I will explain Audubon South Carolina. We're going to talk about this some more, but we're part of National Audubon Society. So I'm executive director of Audubon South Carolina, and I'm a vice president in National Audubon Society. And so we'll talk a little bit about, what that means as an organization. All right. So essentially first, I'm going to talk about like the what and the why for Audubon. So we've lost a lot of birds. We're at a dire moment for a lot of species. At Audubon, we focus on the birds, but I'm an ecologist, and a lot of us look at, the whole ecosystem and how that works together. And, birds are good because there are a lot of birders. Everyone likes birds, okay? So it's a really great kind of commonality. And it's a great indicator species of the health of our ecosystems. So we have lost 3 billion birds in North America since 1970. It's an urgent issue. We are doing something very wrong. And if we don't do something to address that, we're going to lose more. So this is a lot of our why we're doing this work. And so then what are we facing in South Carolina specifically? This is a lot of stats to throw at you. Trust me, I don't like text on slides, but I think it's important to realize how South Carolina works into that and what's the urgency here. So we all know there's a lot of people coming to South Carolina. Y'all are experiencing a lot of it in the Upstate. The coast is going through similar, just kind of shock. We're even experiencing it in the Midlands in Columbia. And so, we are at this moment where we all see what's happening. We need to address tools to fix that. And this is really where the intersection of we cannot save birds without also addressing people. right? I mean, I kind of tongue in cheek say that at Audubon, we care about protecting habitat. And that means for birds and people, okay? Like we have to figure out where people are gonna live and how that is going to interfere with landscape scale protection. These things are intertwined. So it brings me to, okay, so Audubon Society. National Audubon Society is a 100+, we're over a century old as an organization. The National Audubon Society now spans from Chile to the boreal forests of Canada. We are a Western hemispheric organization. I actually had part of my team was in Colombia in South America last week. They just got back. So we are working across the hemisphere because it does not matter if we are protecting this awesome rest stop or breeding ground for birds if we're not paying attention to the flyway and what their migratory path is. And so we are, we're getting creative. We see the urgency in the situation. And so as an organization, we just came out with a strategic plan. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about that and then say what that means to South Carolina. So in South Carolina, we're a state office and we'll talk about what that looks like. So we have our brand new, I started in March 2023 and I walked in, they're like, all right, help us do this. And so it has been quite a journey. You know, for an older organization, I mean, every organization goes through so much change. We actually have the first female CEO of Audubon's history right now. She's an ornithologist. And I mean, she came in, she's like, we need a better strategic plan that truly addresses the urgency of where we are right now. And so this is all connected to the bird loss we've just talked about and the pressures we're experiencing. So we call it we love bird funds. I mean, it's a little much actually. And so our flight plan, our strategic plan. So within the flight plan, you know, we've talked about how we are protecting birds and people. This is our focus. We cannot do one without the other. Okay, we cannot just do the science and kind of hide behind the science and not talk about communities. And when we create conditions for birds to thrive, people will thrive as well. And we need to look at how those are linked. So, you know, this is kind of the North Star for our strategic plan. All right, this one's fun. This is taking over my life at the moment. These are our conservation milestones for how Audubon as a hemispheric organization is going to meet the goals of our flight plan. So for instance, we are going to protect, like by 2028, we are going to protect 300 million acres in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, we are going to get 100 gigawatts of new renewable generation and transmission sited. Like not just, you know, put solar out there, but do it in a way that is good for bird habitats, for instance. Okay, so thinking about the siting of these generation resources. We're also talking about carbon. 30 billion tons of carbon will be stored in forest, wetlands, and grasslands. A dynamic policy agenda. We're working on this one right now. It's very fascinating in terms of, you know, what's happening in the different countries in which we work, you know, in the US and then down in the local communities where we're working as well. So how that is all connected and then focusing on community building. So how are we leaning into and connecting better with our membership, you know, and really kind of activating folks at all those different levels and scales in which we work. And we're doing this, I mean, Audubon's all about science. We have so many wonderful scientists. And so we're also getting this published, like we are setting the stage, we're setting the examples, we're positioning ourselves as experts in the space. So for instance, this is one of, just a cover shot of one of the journals we've been published in on like how to take stuff from a hemispheric goal and break it down into what's happening regionally. So we're looking at this in just new and creative ways, which I think is a lot of fun. It's a lot of what attracted me. I mean, I spent the last decade as a lobbyist at the State House, you know, and it's just really neat to see this from an even different scale, right? So let's talk about Audubon, South Carolina. So we are a state office of National Audubon Society that is different than our chapters, okay? Chapters are so, I luckily don't have to manage my own 501c3. Okay, that's actually kind of nice. And I get to share resources with, right, y'all feel it, with the rest of our organization. You know, like my finance people are in New York or Philly or, and so we get to use our resources more efficiently, which is really lovely to see. And then, chapters are separate 501c3s. So if there's, for instance, there's a campus chapter at Furman. They're their own 501c3. Well, campus chapters are kind of fun, but they're separate and we have working agreements. Okay, so for instance, like we have a chapter department at National Audubon Society that hands out grants and different things. There are lots of benefits to being like a bona fide Audubon chapter. You get a lot of support. And so we have 9 chapters and bird clubs kind of across the state. And there are 3 campus chapters. So Furman, USC, and Claflin University, our first historically Black college university chapter down in Orangeburg. We have been in this state since 1974. We're one of the older state offices, and we've really had a prolific history. We're going to talk about 30,000 active members. A lot of y'all, who knows Beidler Forest, right? Most people are like, well, you're just Beidler Forest. So we do have 2 nature centers and sanctuaries, Beidler Forest and Silver Bluff, which we'll discuss. And we own and or manage 30,000 acres of land. If we own an acre, we are managing it for habitat. And not just like habitat, but specific habitat. Like what species are we managing for? We've done the mapping, we've done the science hemispherically and at the state level to look at what are our priority geographies and our indicator species for success. Okay, where can we make a difference in the future of the species and the future of a geography? So for instance, breaking down like how we're meeting, like how do we ladder up to these gnarly hemispheric goals? In South Carolina, we're going to talk about some of the ways we address habitat conservation work on the ground. My team is mostly scientists and foresters and people actively in the woods doing this work. For instance, one example is, y'all know Beidler and Four Hole Swamp. Yes, Beidler Forest is 18,000 acres. Did you know we actually own 22,000 acres in Four Hole Swamp? Okay, so it's not just Beidler Forest. We try to get creative and look for ways to make contiguous landscape scale protected areas where we can, right? How can we go up against another like park or protected area? What does this look like on the map in terms of, contiguous habitat? So I'll start with some of our programs, our healthy forest work. Y'all heard of our healthy forest work, right? Sure. Yeah, see, not enough people know about it, okay? So this is, enter the initiatives, we call it wings over working lands. Tell you, the birds. So we're looking at working lands. How do we make lands work better for South Carolinians and the birds and other species that need these habitats, okay? So within that, we're looking at how do we do science-based bird and climate-friendly forestry, for instance. I have 2 certified foresters on my team, and I'm actually about to hire an additional person for the forestry team. If you know anyone, we're going to be posting soon. We focus on restoration and protection, strategic acquisition. People ask me every week to go buy land. I don't want to just go buy land, right? I want it to strategically make sense. Most of South Carolina, like when I'm talking to my friends in our Audubon offices out west, they're like, man, public lands. I'm like, yeah, we don't have a lot of public lands. Most of our land is privately held. And so we're not talking about private landowner and land manager outreach education. We are missing it, right? So we're focusing on that and, really looking at how we improve these ecosystems. So, I wish I could introduce you to Tim Evans, our land conservation director. He spent 30 years in commercial forestry and is a wonderful forester and biologist. And he's just the most like approachable, good old boy you've ever met, right? And he just gets whole communities wrapped around his finger. And so he manages our team that manages 30,000 acres of land. Because like, for instance, we have some properties that are in wills, but bequested to us. But the owners are so into leaving this land to us that they want to work with us now to manage it and to restore it, and then leave it in our hands for the future, right? And we do not accept land. I mean, like, people are like, it's free land. Like, I don't want your free land. Your free land is going to cost a ton of money because we're going to actively manage it and restore it, right? So we do not accept land without a stewardship fund associated with it, because we are the forever stewards of that land, and we want to make sure we are set up to do that. So we have endowments and reserve funds to support each acre we own. So you shouldn't be making money off of your land, and you can restore and protect your land and make money off of it. Okay, so I mean, like, yes, you can reduce your tax burden through a conservation easement, but you can also do strategic bird-friendly forestry. We harvest timber. We have a logging operation going on a few of our properties in the Midlands right now. For instance, in that situation, we're thinning a loblolly pine and restoring it to a longleaf pine ecosystem. I mean, forests need to change, right? And so much of our forests in South Carolina are basically cornfields of loblolly. They're not a great habitat, right? So thinking strategically about that, and that money goes right back into managing that ecosystem. We're also doing carbon trading. We're one of the first states in the Audubon network to get into that. And we've applied for really big grants to teach and help small landowners tap into that. Because if you're too small, you can't do it. But what if we work together to make that happen? Okay, so like, there are ways to get over some of those barriers. We also do mitigation. Wetlands mitigation, why not? We're going to be restoring the land anyway. Why not make money off of it while folks are doing terrible things on other properties? And then we also, so we do carbon, we do mitigation, we have easements on our properties, of course, and I'm missing one. Oh, it's not on here, but did you know that we support 36 hunting and fishing clubs on our properties? When you own 30,000 acres of land, you need eyes in the woods, right? And that helps us with poachers and everything, and it helps us with invasive species. So, for instance, you can't hunt feathers on Audubon property. That would be too on the nose. We want to grow the quail and turkeys, but you can hunt deer and hogs. I mean, we took almost 700 hogs off of Beidler in 2018. That was our historic year. I mean, they're killing the landscape. So those hunt and fishing clubs are wonderful, and it's great passive income for us. So, thinking about creative ways to fund it. So we become the experts. Tim Evans, I mentioned, he is the only bottomland hardwood silviculturalist in the state. The Forestry Commission looks to him for what to do. Right, and so position ourselves as that, and then sharing that information. So we manage these are a few of the properties you might know that we manage. So Silver Bluff is our sanctuary on the Savannah River. If you have not been there, it is worth it. It is fascinating. It was a plantation. It was agriculture. That land has been through so much, and it's a really cool story of restoration at different stages. Like, if you're a real scientist and you really want to get out, get out there. It is neat because you're going to see all kinds of just succession within the forest, different types of habitats, bottomland hardwoods. You're also going to be on a bluff of the Savannah River that's breathtaking. Do it.
Silver Bluff?
Silver Bluff. It is in Jackson, South Carolina, right below Savannah River site on the Savannah River. So if you can get to Aiken, you can get to Silver Bluff. You should probably stop and take a restroom break in Aiken. And we'll talk about why. And then Beidler Forest, y'all have heard about Beidler Forest, old growth cypress tupelo. It's the largest stand of its type in the world. If you have not been there, get there. And it is a gorgeous time of year to do it. I mean, gorgeous.
What's the oldest tree you have?
I mean, the median tree is one of our biggest and oldest. It's at least 1,000 years old. Forget it. Yeah, it's gotta be. So lovely. That's my favorite. I go visit every time. I'm like, I at least have to visit the meeting tree, right? It's absolutely, so get out to Beidler. It's a beautiful time of year to do it. And Beidler Forest is part of Four Hole Swamps. We do a lot of management in that area. McElhaney and Wanamaker. These are two preserves owned by chapters. So Wanamaker is owned by the Columbia Audubon chapter, but it's like in Calhoun County. And McElhaney is owned by the Charleston chapter of the Charleston Natural History Society. And I cannot think of which county. It's in between Charleston and Columbia in that no man's land, and I cannot remember which county. And then our latest acquisitions. Y'all know Congaree River in the national park. Look across the river from the national park, you see the Congaree Bluffs. They're stunning, and we are acquiring property on that bluff, and it is breathtaking. A-Rant is the property we currently have in our ownership. That's about 400 acres. We have another 700 bequested to us on that bluff that we're managing. So if y'all as an organization want to go out and see A-Rant, it is by appointment only. We don't have the staffing to open up to the public yet, but we agreed with some of the funding that we wanted to get people out there. So with enough heads up, we can get y'all out there. It is so awesome. There's longleaf restoration going on. There's some meadow restoration. It is just very cool. And a gorgeous view of the national park. All right, so for instance, we talked about longleaf pine restoration. This is some of the crew. That's Jen Tyrell up front and center. Who was I talking to? Yeah. So, and then picture some of the grassland restoration, y'all. Beautiful, beautiful. We also look for partnerships. So, this is one example where we worked on, utility right-of-ways, using native plants, prescribed fire, helping with some of those practices, teaching what we know. I wanted to show you all one example from that. So we haven't historically done a lot of work in the Upstate, but the Upstate is a great place for migratory species, and it hits on our prairie geography map. So we have started one project up here over in Glendale. So removing invasives, adding riparian buffers and degraded sections. I mean, y'all know some of these just degraded riparian areas you see in the Upstate. Really kind of looking strategically at doing that. We are partnering with Upstate Forever Trees, Upstate Wofford, and Tiger River Foundation on that one. We don't have I don't have any staff up here. Most of my staff are in the Low Country or Midlands. So, I don't want to come up here and make promises I can't keep and do that kind of stuff, but we are looking at ways, like we went out and got a grant, shared it with these partners, said, let's start doing this work together. So we're looking for partners on the ground up here that we can help each other do this work. So climate action, we're also paying attention to this. One example, we're looking at natural climate solutions. So for instance, one example of that, have y'all been down at Cape Romaine National Wildlife Refuge? It's so cool, isn't it? It's absolutely gorgeous. There's, it's between Charleston and Myrtle Beach-ish, okay, off Highway 17. It's, people have figured it out, right? They discovered it. It's starting to, the population's starting to grow. You have a couple of old fishing towns, Allendale and Cullenville. And they get hammered. I mean, they were leveled in Hugo. Every time a storm comes around, they're getting it on the nose. And they have this beautiful National Wildlife Refuge off their shores, where you have just, the black skimmers, like some of the beautiful shorebirds and seabirds that take over those little islands are really very cool. Now, I kind of thought the team was hazing me the first summer they took me out there because it was, August out on those islands. But it really is worth it. Don't go in the heat of the summer, but otherwise it's absolutely breathtaking. So we do have a conservation team, and we have a federal NOAA grant, co-creating natural climate solutions with this community. Like environmental groups have done a lot of work in these communities, but environmental groups have never come to the communities and said, how can we do this with you, not at you? So we're trying to change the way that work is done. We have a lot of partners on the ground with that one. So Nature Conservancy, and then more local ones like Low Country Land Trust, for instance. So Ducks Unlimited, like this work does not happen alone, right? There's always partnerships. And for instance, on the coast, we actually are looking at a Carolinas approach. So our office in North Carolina, we actually shared that NOAA grant with them, for instance, and we've done the mapping and, looking at, there are 1 million acres of shoreline that need our help, right? And so looking at strategically where we can approach that was why we picked Cape Romaine. It was such a hot spot for species and for people. that needed the help. So, looking at what we can protect, what we can defend, and what we can restore from a resilience perspective. We also, have y'all heard of our shorebird stewards program? All right, so we have groups of volunteers at several sites. You'll see some of these sites on the map, several different sites where we have communities that want to go out and help nesting shorebirds and keep human disturbances away from them, kind of like turtle teams, sea turtle teams and things like that. So these shorebird teams, these shorebird stewards, and that has been a growing program, that we're continuing to expand, that has really kind of helped pull all this together. And then we're looking at advancing climate priorities, and that's where, you have an intersection between conservation work and policy work. So we're looking at, energy generation, transmission, resilience policies, working with the federal delegation. We do have a policy team in DC as well as a policy team here in Columbia. And then we also, we helped create the South Carolina Office of Resilience during COVID. Our lobbyist was just amazing during that time, and we were really able to make great things happen. So how can we really guide leadership? The governor, that kind of stuff. We built great relationships. So which gets into the policy piece of this. That is a pivotal piece. So when we're doing this work, well, for instance, I was talking to my forestry team the other day, and they said, dang it, there's another subdivision coming in on yet another side of Idler Forest. We're not going to be able to burn over there. It's do we need to look for policy solutions for buffers, better kind of buffer rules between managed forests and that sort of thing, so kind of piecing the conservation and the science team together with the policy team to find the solutions we need. So, that the energy policy stuff I mentioned with climate action, resilience, what are kind of just core bird protections? There's some nationally, internationally, and at the local level. Financing bird conservation. I think I was talking to someone earlier about the Conservation Bank. It's a state agency protecting lands. We just passed a piece of legislation this last legislative year that helps protect ag lands as well, real focus on that, because ag, farms are some of our last remaining grassland habitat. So if we're looking at grassland species, we have to work with farmers and we have to protect farms. So how do we help them when a subdivision might just be easier and get them more money, right? And how do you make it profitable and affordable? Let's see, we are working on wetlands legislation this coming year. We're working on our policy agenda right now. I'm hiring a new policy director. Just made an offer. They start in a month. Very excited. So we're going to be growing our policy shop as well, which just has a ton of potential. All right. And then community building. Really, none of this works if you're not working with communities. We actually don't have a dedicated staff person to work with chapters right now. So a lot of what I've done since just coming into this leadership role is address operations and capacity, right? That's the boring work of it, but it's the vital work to making a really productive and effective organization. So we actually have a position open right now, a community partnerships manager. It is a brand new position for Audubon, South Carolina, and it's kind of a new concept for National Audubon Society to have someone who's not a scientist, not a bird scientist. We don't need more of those necessarily. We need people. People that are trained in how to organize and work with communities. That is a different skill set. And it took me about a year to convince them of that. So, this is a new arena for us. It's something that I have experience doing in my career. And so I'm really excited about bringing this position to Audubon, South Carolina. If you know anyone, it's posted on audubon.org. Please check it out. And then let's see, we are, I actually am moving one of our amazing bird scientists into a community science and research position right now, kind of readjusting some of our job descriptions. So stay tuned for more in that space and also the urban conservation space. We can do great work in urban areas too, and that's where the people are and where we can meet them where they are. Let's see, and then this is a good plug on this slide. Just, the second Saturdays are free at Idler. And it has been a great, we do charge an admission fee to get into the nature center and access the boardwalk at Byler. Now you can still access some other trails for free, but we do charge a basic admission fee. But offering free second Saturdays has opened us up more to the community, to big families, things like that, that might not otherwise be able to visit Byler Forest. And it has just been a lot of fun, especially this month. It fell on a day we were doing an underground railroad tour in the forest. Because did you know that Byler Forest was a part of the Underground Railroad and was a host to maroon communities? It was a part of this network to freedom for freedom seekers, and it has this amazing cultural history that's complicated and important to tell. So we're actually a part of the National Park Service Network to Freedom officially, and are doing a lot more to tell that story. So for instance, talking about Byler and Silver Bluff. I got away from myself. So when I walked into Byler Forest, there were a couple of things I noticed. First, the carpet was threadbare. It had not been renovated since it was opened in the 70s. There were some dusty exhibits showing, like old dead taxidermy animals and things like that. And it really hadn't been updated to tell all the different stories we can tell to people visiting Byler Forest. So, and then Silver Bluff, went to Silver Bluff, and did you know, Byler turned 50 years old this spring. Silver Bluff turns 50 next year. I went to Silver Bluff. Do you know there are no public restrooms? It's 49 years old and there are no public restrooms. Okay, so I noticed the visitor experience was not ideal, right, at either one of these facilities. And I mean, yes, it's about the birds first and foremost. It's about the habitat protection and restoration, but like we care about the people too. We're inviting into this is our like front porch, right? Like I see Byler and Silver Bluff as like the front porch of the organization. This is how we're pulling people in. The amount of international tourists we get at Byler, I mean, we have a story to tell and we should be telling it better. So not only should these be like a hub of figuring out how you can get activated to help with birds and people and, integrated into Audubon, South Carolina's work, and, learn like what we're doing hemispherically. Like Byler, we have a sister sanctuary in Colombia, South America, because we know our prothonotary warblers migrate down there. And it's super cool. And we should be telling that story at the visitor center, for instance. So we need to do a lot in that arena. We also need to embed, I threw an acronym in here. I should have done that. EDIB, equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging. Okay. Like embedding those values more in it, telling the cultural history of a site, as well as the natural history of the site. Byler has a complicated history. We've been working more. We're actually working with Native American tribes in the Low Country right now to help them with land loss, land protection, some of their goals. And particularly the tribe that used to call Byler home. And we're actually looking at what are some of our lands that we can give back to the tribes, which would be great. All right. So EDIB, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I know it's a mouthful. Forgive me for the acronym. So we're doing, and then also, I mean, my staff just didn't know what their budgets were and how they could, and they didn't know that they could replace the toilets that they needed to replace, right? So a lot of what we've been doing is focusing on some of those opportunities. So these pictures don't do it justice, was what I could find quickly. Byler Forest went through a massive renovation this year. It's no longer orange. And there's better flooring. There are new toilets. That really did a lot for staff morale. I don't know. I mean, if you lead a team, if you have not just replaced the toilets lately for them, it really can do a lot. So we completely redid the center, did some spring cleaning, that sort of thing. And just, took care of deferred maintenance, which was so important. So we did a lot of that work at Byler. Please go check it out if you haven't visited. Next, our second phase, we'll be working with a consultant to look at like the visitor experience part of it, like the exhibits. We're gonna have to raise some money for that. I mean, it's not gonna be as affordable as the renovations, and we had some help from our national board and we had some money in savings and stuff, but I want to, I want people to be able to come in and learn where our birds go across the hemisphere. I want them to be able to learn about the Underground Railroad, about the Edisto-Natchez-Cusco tribe. We don't tell kind of the different stories of the Beidler family and why they never logged it. And, some of those different stories associated with Beidler Forest and Fort Hole Swamp. So that's going to be the next phase of it. Also, did y'all know there are 2 cabins in the woods where people can stay? And we have only just now started renovating them. I purchased 3 HVAC units this summer. Cheap. And and we're looking at how we can host, like we host the occasional intern or maybe a new staff member that needs temporary housing, but how can we better use some of those facilities? Whether it's making donors feel good, whether it's giving staff some benefits. Like I took my family to go stay in one of those cabins. This is fantastic. Whether it is hosting more researchers, visiting artists. I mean, there's so many opportunities. So like we're looking at some of that too. Sometimes when you acquire land, it comes with old buildings. And so how can we better use those assets to be beneficial? You know how many times people ask us to get married at the meeting tree? And we say, no, we could be doing something with that. So we're looking at what are those opportunities that can help us also fund this work in creative ways. So those are some of the opportunities at Beidler right now. I will note, if you haven't been to Beidler in a minute, I convinced the staff to open back up to pre-COVID hours. That took something. So we are open from Wednesday to Sunday now. And longer hours in the spring. I mean, if y'all haven't been around for spring migration in Beidler, you are missing out. It is magical. So please come visit. And we also had a very generous donor just gave us all new kayaks and canoes, and we've expanded our guided paddling program through a partnership with Edisto River Kayak and Canoe Association. And they're helping us provide guides because we only have 3 or 4 staff at Beidler, and you really should be on a guided trip or else we will never see you again. And there is a large family of alligators. So we really wanted to do this strategically. So, but we are now offering more paddling trips. So, whatever your kind of adventure is, we can support you. There's also a grasslands trail. If you've never gone down that at Beidler, it is worth it. Silver Bluff, our underrated sanctuary. I don't play favorites, but I like Silver Bluff. It is so neat. We talked about Beidler's 18,000 acres. Silver Bluff is 3,400 acres. It is on a 30-foot bluff of the Savannah River. It's breathtaking. It's also got a cool cultural history. It was a trading post for a lot of Native American tribes. Being on the river like that. It was part of Governor Hammond's massive plantation. He recorded how terrible of a human he was prolifically. And it was a pretty awful plantation. And we have enslaved people cemeteries on site. I mean, we have a lot of history that we've never talked about on that site that we need to. So that's on the to-do list as well. We do have this building. It got a new fresh coat of paint. This building had not had functional drinking water for 3 years because the well had broken and they could not get through DHEC permitting. So we've made that happen. This last year, the well just became functional last week. So this is not an open visitor center in the same way that Beidler is. So at Silver Bluff, there is an electronic gate. It opens dawn to dusk. Go in, choose your adventure, check out some trails. You're gonna see some kiosks. You kind of do what you want there. That building is an office and has like some classroom spaces and for us to do things. But it is not always open, and that's where the only restrooms are. We also have a forester that lives on site, but we don't open up his home. So we actually do some generous donors. We are, now that we have functional well, we are installing restroom facilities at Silver Bluff. So we're going to install restroom facilities in the main campus near this building. And there are kind of 2 campuses. There's a main campus, and then there's a campus we call Capwood Ponds. Did y'all know we have a fantastic wood stork population that comes through Silver Bluff? It's amazing. Storks and Quirks is our event to go see this wood storks. It happens the first Saturday of August. Okay, so you go up with that. It's miserable. I mean, August at Silver Bluff is a miserable time of year, but it's worth the sweat and the bugs, I promise. It's very, very neat. And we actually, those ponds originally were, Department of Energy had to build them to say sorry to the wood storks. And the wood stork populations rebounded so much that we're actually shifting to just how do we protect inland shorebirds. And the populations of inland shorebirds using the ponds at Silver Bluff it's just impressive. But then you can go to another part of Silver Bluff in a longleaf pine restored area and hear quail everywhere, and Bachman sparrow, and just neat species. And then there's bottomland hardwood forest. There is a weird area where back in the 1800s, someone saw a Carolina Bay, so an isolated wetland, and tried to turn it into a rice field in Aiken County. It was not successful, and it completely ruined that Carolina Bay. So we are restoring that wetland right now. So I mean, there's just a lot of really neat habitats at Silver Bluff. This picture right here is from, this was a pole barn that stored tractors, and we didn't need it. We have other places to store tractors. And so we turned it into an event venue space. And this was a picture from, there's a lot of rain at Storks and Quirks this year. But this is a picture from Storks and Quirks right after the guys did the work. This was all done by Silver Bluff staff. They're so awesome. Anyway, we've got venue space now at Silver Bluff. We're going to have public restrooms. It's going to be great. So please go out and check out Silver Bluff. For the meantime, stop at that gas station on your way in if you need a break. But hopefully we will have restrooms within the next year, which I think everyone needs a comfortable way to visit. And we'll be looking at other ways to improve the visitor experience there as well. Then we also, getting back to how we're working with communities, I wanted to give you all some good, I haven't talked enough about native plants. So bird-friendly communities, this is something we'll be doing more with some of the staff changes we've been making. So I think you'll see more in this space in the coming years. But this is where we have different native plant programs. We have lights out programs, especially like during fall migration, the amount of birds that die on buildings. So addressing that. And, really kind of digging more into like urban and suburban conservation to better connect with humans as well as those habitats. This is a little bit of a throwback from 2018. Our policy team worked with Governor at McMaster to do a Native Plant Week resolution. This is in October. We've kind of done fun things like this over time. Governor McMaster's actually really into it. Okay, he's actually quite a conservationist. He's incredibly passionate about land protection, and we're doing some really cool stuff with him right now in regard to that. He wants it to be his legacy. He wants to actually double the amount of protected lands in South Carolina in his tenure, and he is passionate about it. He actually told our lobbyists recently that he wasn't thinking big enough. So I mean, it's fun. He gets really into native plants. We actually, since 2018, there are multiple native plant installations at the Governor's Mansion. If y'all have not been to the Governor's Mansion grounds, they're actually awesome. It's really cool to go check it out. It's like open 9 to 5 on weekdays. I used to have an office across the street and loved just kind of hiding in those gardens when I needed a break, and it's absolutely stunning. So I recommend checking those out. Just an example of what we could do. There's a story map about this on our website at sc.audubon.org in our bird-friendly community section. Also, audubon.org, our national site, has great native plant resources, and they've actually just recently improved them. So I wanted to make sure y'all knew that. For instance, there's this great finding bird-friendly native plants resource. So I recommend that as something to share and check out. And that kind of leads me to my summary piece. But Jen Tyrell, I think some of us were talking about her. She's our amazing bird scientist, native plant person, and she's going to be digging into a lot of this more. So hopefully we can, connect y'all with her as well. and maybe get y'all out to A-Rant and some of the other sites, because I think y'all would thoroughly enjoy them. Which brings me back to kind of the priorities and opportunities for Audubon, South Carolina. I've spent the last roughly 18 months getting this team kind of back in shape. They didn't have consistent leadership for a while. They didn't have a good vision and kind of plan what they were going to do. And we're putting those pieces together right now. I think there's so many opportunities. I was really happy where I was at Conservation Voters. Audubon took about a year to recruit me for this role. I did not really see a need to take this on. And the more I thought about it, I said, Audubon can do so many things. First off, we can talk about birding, which is such a good thing to bring people together around. As a landowner, we can walk in and have conversations with government master about what we think South Carolina can do. And that is just fun. We're going to be at the Grand Tie tomorrow celebrating Rick. And we're going to have Representative Russell Ott at our table because he wants to talk about some of the land management work we're doing in his county. So, we can show people how it's done. We can use Beidler and Silverbuff as demonstration sites, which is super awesome. And that's going to be the next phase of that. We're driving state and federal funding. We're working on new partnerships, especially with that new role we're hiring right now. Please share that around. Our land management story and our restoration story are impressive. We're going to tell those stories more. We're going to be working more and more on grassland protection. We talked a lot about healthy forests, and grasslands, the next program we want to expand. And I am a policy geek at heart. And so I really think we have to talk more about land use policy if we want to protect landscape scale habitat. It gets frustrating. Land conservation community in South Carolina is just like, we should go buy more land. You know how much that land costs right now? That is not the answer. We can't just keep buying it all. We're also losing it. So we actually have to talk about how people are using the land, where we're developing, and where we're housing policy is inherently conservation policy right now. And so that's something I feel passionately about. And lawmakers are coming to us saying they want help finding the answer. And we need to be ready to step up to that challenge. So I'm getting people riled up about that now. And then finally, coastal stewardship, bringing all those pieces together. So I've thrown a lot at you. I will take a breath. I am right on time. And here's our new paint job at Beidler. But questions?
One question.
Yes.
Okay, Governor McMaster wants to double what?
Protected land in South Carolina. Yeah. He's really into mapping. And he's been very excited looking at, what are the protected, what is the map of protected lands across South Carolina? There was an effort a few years ago to say, well, let's get 30% or something. I forget what the exact numbers were of lands protected by 2030. He said, that's not big enough. He's like, no, we're gonna double. I want to keep pushing for more and more. He's very excited about it. It was partly he keeps prioritizing funding for the Conservation Bank. He also has been prioritizing a ton of funding with lawmakers into the Office of Resilience. And so there's a lot of land protection happening out of those two agencies, as well as DNR and Parks and Recreation and Tourism. So there's just a lot going on. And lawmakers generally, these might be trying times politically, but lawmakers in South Carolina have a bipartisan love for land protection, and they have a strong land ethic. It might come from different places and for different reasons, but it is a commonality that brings them together despite some of the drama, which is really nice to see.
So can you explain the difference between the South Carolina Coalition, the Conservation Coalition, and the Conservation Voters of South Carolina?
Oh, sure. So Conservation Voters of South Carolina is a nonprofit. It is a 501c3 and a 501c4. So 501c4 is a political organization. Your donations to a 501c4 are not tax deductible, but a 501c4 is fun because it gets to lobby as much as it wants. It gets to make political endorsements. It gets to have a scorecard of lawmakers. It was fun. I really enjoyed working for Conservation Voters. The South Carolina Conservation Coalition The Conservation Voters is like its fiscal sponsor. Because the Conservation Coalition is not a separate 501c3. It doesn't need to be, it's just like a program. So Conservation Voters of South Carolina, their staff manage the coalition and provide administrative support and, you know, handle the dues and stuff and handle that in a separate account so that the coalition doesn't have to be its own 501c3 and like fund its own staff person, because it's really just an opportunity to bring everyone together and make sure we are not stepping on each other's toes, particularly the State House, where like you gotta be on your game and you gotta be coordinated to get it done.
We're a member of the Conservation Coalition, we also made it. There's two different things.
Yep, two different things, two different memberships and approaches. I mean, the Conservation Voters very much tries to be like, we do not speak for the coalition. You know, the coalition has its own leadership, like kind of managing body, like a steering committee. So yeah, y'all are Native Plant Society's members of the Conservation Coalition. And that doesn't, you know, Conservation Voters, it's like an individual, like if you want to be an individual supporter of Conservation Voters.
Okay, so the coalition is a 501c3.
No, the coalition is not its own 501c3. It doesn't need to be.
Okay,
It's just a program. It's managed by a steering committee that has policies and procedures. Because it's just a way to pull people together.
got it.
Like no one works for the coalition.
Yeah, but the Native Plant Society is a 501c3.
Yeah. The members of the Conservation Coalition have to be 501c3s.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First is when we give money as an individual to the Conservation Voters of South Carolina, am I getting into the 501c3 or the 501c4?
So,
When I give money to them, I write it off as a tax to the.
you will see your Conservation Voters is very clear about which website you are like, you know, which one you're donating to, and you'll see that in your receipt. It should say if it's a 501c3 or 501c4, because they're very careful about it. Yeah. Most donations go into the C3, but it kind of depends on how you were asked. You go ahead, and then we'll go up front.
Go ahead. I actually have questions.
Okay, we'll come back.
So you had mentioned, going back to questions about the continuous land, is there a way for like the common lay person to actually see the maps of what is protected land and like where would we go to see that?
It's a great question. I know there are some maps like at the Conservation Bank website and stuff like that. I know we want to put better mapping on our website as well. So I think it's something that's missing, and there might be some other opportunities. I can ask my team about it, because I've been a little bit confused about the different resources that are out there and what's publicly available. Multiple layers.
Like, you know, like you guys do the Nature Conservancy, all of that, and you see, you guys all have a big collective picture.
Yeah, and there are, I just don't know what's publicly available. So I'll ask about that and I can get back to y'all. Because like, for instance, the Nature Conservancy, some of their GIS staff, like mapping staff, put together like a layer of protected lands for all of us, where we like all get around a table and work on stuff together, for instance. So there's a lot of coordination happening behind the scenes, but that's a great question about what is publicly available.
Question that came from you.
Sure.
I'm going to contact my state and federal politicians about various pieces of legislation, either pro or against. How can we participate?
Good question. I believe on our website, which I really want to improve, and I don't know that intimately yet. On our website, there is an option on there to sign up for action alerts. I am bringing on a brand new policy director right now, and we're going to be revamping all of that and trying to offer more opportunities for action and engagement. So I think one option right now is y'all are connected to the Conservation Coalition. They also push out action alerts. Definitely do that. If you want to do it through an Audubon lens, go sign up on our website. If that doesn't work, let me know, because it's a special website right now. We're going to be hiring communication staff at some point. The legislative session starts in January. There is a Conservation Coalition Lobby Day in February. Do you remember the date?
23rd, I mentioned.
Yeah, I want to say it's somewhere around that. We can share that, but there is a Conservation Coalition Lobby Day, which is a great opportunity to come, you know, represent Native Plant Society, represent Audubon, float around between different orgs, do what you want. And that's a really fun time to also kind of lobby with other conservationists and, you know, and have like strength in numbers. Because I encourage the in-person stuff. I will say, I know action alerts via email are the easiest. They make a difference, they absolutely do. Phone calls make the biggest difference. And like, and direct communication. The amount of lawmakers that are like, oh, that guy, there's so many people about it. I'm like, cool, how many? 5. Okay, like they don't get calls that often. They get emails a lot, right? But they don't get people actually reaching out. So I know it can feel like a burden, it feels scary, but like they're just humans. And I really encourage that because it really, really makes a difference. Yeah. Anything else?
Discussion on energy sources. Yes. Review on those various projects.
Yeah.
Professionally, National Audubon Society is currently generation neutral. I don't like that answer. We're having conversations about what that means internally at Audubon. We are more focused on Audubon at the generation and transmission and the impact it has on like the site, right? So siting and transmission. So for instance, if you're going to ask me like how I feel about natural gas production in the Ace Basin, I would have questions about the siting with that. We opposed the energy legislation this last year because it tried to roll back permitting and basic siting laws. And so we didn't get into the conversation about, well, natural gas or solar or nuclear, or we didn't get into that conversation, but we did get into the conversation of like, whatever you're generating, even if it's a solar farm, do it in a way that is better for the natural environment and the species we're trying to protect. So that has been our niche in that conversation. And that has been a very complicated conversation.
And I was on an energy team meeting today. So I serve on, I'm the advocacy chair of the state of South Carolina Plant Society. So monthly, I'm on calls with the energy team. I'm on the call with the water team. And so I'm on a couple of different committees here with that. So it's a busy month with conference calls and stuff. But we're constantly talking about policies and ways we can influence our legislators and also make a better footprint. When it comes to energy production and that type of thing, it's a hot button issue right now with a lot of pressure from a lot of different directions. And so we're at a really kind of an influx of which way we're actually going to go as a state. So just stay tuned. We get the conservation voters alerts, hot list basically, and that goes to our media team and it winds up on our website. So if you want to know things like that, you can go to the National Plant Society website and see what the current issues are, what legislation's out there, et cetera. And we don't necessarily write what our positions are per se, but we give you the information so you can go find out and make your own decision.
I think that's great, Rick. Thank you. And Conservation Voters currently has the biggest policy and lobby team. So they're monitoring stuff the closest. I mean, some of it's just a capacity issue, and we all get together at the State House. I mean, it's a small, scrappy team of lobbyists that go up against these entities. So I think it's going to be a really hot button issue again this year. I encourage you to follow it. It's nice and complicated. We're probably going to get natural gas in some capacity, and it's what it looks like.
And a few years ago, we've all worked together for the offshore drilling that came about, you know, and we showed up at the State House in Matt and stood at the steps there and did our thing and advocated our legislators about that. And then the coal-fired plant on the PD, that was another issue that came about a few years ago, and we were able to kind of put the kibosh on that. But we need it, and we need energy for the future. So we all have to, like Rebecca said, we have to kind of work together on this stuff to figure out what we need and how it's best to do that to fit in with our natural environment.
Yeah, agreed.
I think you had a couple.
So my question was, what are we gonna do with the energy and what can I get exactly from the Audubon to some extent, what Audubon's positions were. And I don't think you're gonna do that.
The same.
No, I mean,
the same question.
we are, yeah, and I mean, we are gonna, I mean, my new policy, I just extended an offer to be a policy director this week. They will start October 21st. Thankfully, I have hired one of the top lobbyists in the state. And I'm super excited about it. But we don't have the policy agenda like on paper yet. So I can't share that with you yet, but it's in the works. We are going to look at kind of, the Senate is debating right now ahead of session what a Senate energy bill might look like. We've been monitoring and staying abreast of that. We're trying to figure out like what they're gonna do and what it's gonna look like. And so as we evaluate that, we're working on guidance on like what we want in terms of transmission and sighting for birds. And you know, that's something that like we'll be sharing more of. So I know that's a cruddy like in progress.
That's a wonderful answer to the question.
Mhm.
One of the pressing things that I have is what Rick was just talking about, and that is how are legislators deciding how to go forward with what our next energy source will be? Will it be renewable? Will it be fossil fuels? And how are they coming to those? And I haven't heard anything about that in months.
Yes, well, I mean, they've been out of session, so it's been quiet. They got out in May, and then they've all been running they're all up for re-election in November, so they've been a little distracted. The Senate has gotten together and started talking about it. So far, it has been a dog and pony show of the utilities saying what they want. And my cynical lobbyist answer is they will do what the utilities tell them to do. And the utilities are telling them that we need natural gas and we need a ton of it. And we need new generation because the utilities only know how to make money off of new generation. Like they don't want to address their business model and think creatively about that. They just want to build more plants. Like nuclear didn't work, so like how can they build more plants? There is a need for more baseload. And that is a very valid conversation. And we probably do. I don't know, my husband works in economic development. We have this argument a lot at home. We probably, a lot of the industries we're bringing to South Carolina, a lot of the electric vehicle manufacturers and things like that we're bringing are saying they need natural gas pipelines. So there's probably going to be additional pipeline development and construction. I think there's argument about whether or not we need another generation facility. So because there's actually a lot of natural gas like on the around, we're just not tapping into it. And so it's really an argument about how. So I think that there will be natural gas expansion of some kind, which is what it looks like and how we do it and who carries that cost.
The argument I hear from so many people is that once we take that step, we are locked into fossil fuel generation of power for 30 years.
I absolutely agree.
So I'm gonna.
And
pause-
it's really, really expensive.
I'm just pause it right there.
Yeah.
And I have one other question that I think is like, so very important, but this is more like homegrown in your backyard,
Yeah.
literally. What are the barriers to working with HOAs to bring them on board with restoring backyard habitats?
God.
So, I have one last question myself that I'm really curious about, going back to something you said in your presentation.
I think the barriers differ a lot. Did y'all know that that there is an association that represents HOAs at the State House?
Oh, my God.
And they have one of the most well-heeled, interesting lobbyists working for them. And his job is just go around and kill every piece of legislation meant to push back on HOAs. And lawmakers hate HOAs. But there's enough of them that listen to this one lobbyist. I've watched it. And it's so weird. So, y'all, the strength of trade associations at the State House is fascinating. So I think that's one of them. I think, it has to come from the inside. I have watched groups, take over their HOA board and really change stuff. And I think that's where it has to happen. Like in the same way, like if you're ticked about stuff in your community, get on city council, get on county council, get on the school board. Like you got to do the hard thing. Like you got to actually get engaged. Like it's more than even just voting. Like if you really want to make the change, like you have to do the hard work, which is not the easy answer. But that the communities I have seen that have effectively pushed back on their HOAs, particularly related, I've worked with a lot on solar. I've not, worked much in this space yet, with them, but particularly like on solar panels and those kinds of installations, the ones I've seen that are successful are just scrappy retirees just going after that HOA board. And I mean, it's been impressive, but it has taken work over years to get there. And a lot of people just don't have that like commitment to it, which it is asking a lot. I was my neighborhood president for years and it was worse than lobbying. So
You could get there to see it. What are the dates? Like, what are the hot dates?
April, May are like the real best.
Mhm. And what kind of birds are we seeing there?
Oh, the prothonotary warblers, and boy, are those boys nasty. I mean, they are so territorial and they're going after each other. And they have such like great site fidelity, like some of them go back to that same cypress knee, and I mean, you can just sit at the meeting tree and just watch them. I mean, they're so much fun. So in prothonotaries, very cool. There is, the barred owls. I mean, oh gosh, there's just so many. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. There was one, what was it? The woodpecker. Oh, it's not favorites. There was this one, and I cannot. What's it called? Padula? Northern Padula.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, their nesting was really cool to see this spring. I'd never seen some of the cool nests they make. I mean, they're just adorable. There's a lot of other warbler species. There's one little warbler mama that nested right next to the boardwalk. I mean, you could just look at her. She's like, what? I don't care. And then also at Byler, I mean, if you're into I'm actually more of a herpetologist. And I mean, that's cool. So there's great snakes and gators and lizards and all kinds of creepy crawlies. And there's a beautiful family of otters right now off the boardwalk. They show off. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Oh, really?
Awesome sauce, girl.
Thank you so much. That was so great.
All right, I stopped screen share, but I did not like this.
Thank you.
Yeah.